The evening sun cast a warm golden glow over my backyard, the perfect setting for what I hoped would be a relaxing barbecue with friends. The air was thick with the tantalizing aroma of sizzling steaks and spices, smoke rising in gentle curls. From my brand new electric grill, the laughter of my guests blended with the clinking of glasses, and I felt a rare moment of peace. My property, my rules. I had spent months perfecting this little oasis, and tonight, nothing was going to spoil it, or so I thought. Suddenly, the sound of tires crunching over gravel shattered the calm. A caravan of white SUVs and pickup trucks rolled up my driveway, engines growling and headlights piercing the dusk. My heart sank. Marlene, the HOA's ruthless president, known in our neighborhood as the enforcer of every arbitrary rule, lead a squad of at least 6 stern-faced officials, clipboards in hand, marching toward my yard like an invading force. Before I could say a word, Marlene's sharp voice cut through the noise. "Mr. Harris," she said, tone icy, "you are in violation of community rules. No open flames after 7 p.m. You must cease grilling immediately." I blinked, confused. "Excuse me, since when do you have the right to tell me what time I can cook on my own property?" Marlene didn't flinch. "Community guidelines are clear, Mr. Harris. This is a direct violation. Fines will be issued if you do not comply." I glanced around. My friends exchanged uneasy looks, some whispering behind their hands. A few neighbors peeked over fences, curious about the commotion. I took a deep breath and stood my ground. "Show me where in the rules it says I can't grill after 7 p.m. I've read them thoroughly, and there's no such curfew." Marlene flipped through her papers, her smile tight and forced. "Page 12, Section 4 billion. No open flames are permitted outside designated areas or times." For safety reasons, I narrowed my eyes. That's vague at best. This grill is electric, no open flames. And I'm in my backyard, a private property. There's no designated area or time specified for grilling. One of the younger HOA agents, looking uncomfortable, tried to interject. "We're just enforcing the rules, sir." I cut him off. "Rules or power plays?" Suddenly, my dog Barkley darted between us, barking furiously, breaking the tension. The HOA enforcers stepped back, startled. I saw my chance. Raising my voice, I said, "Listen, I'm not here to argue forever, but you can't just storm onto my property and shut down my grill without proof. If you want to challenge me, bring it on." Marlene's eyes flashed dangerously. "You're making this difficult, Mr. Harris." "Funny," I replied, "because this is just the start." The crowd of neighbors watching from behind fences began to murmur, some whispering support, others fear. Marlene took a step closer, lowering her voice. "You're risking fines, legal action, and community sanctions." I smirked. "And I'm risking your power trip getting exposed." Her face tightened, and she motioned to her team to pack up. "We'll be back." As they filed out, I could hear whispers of victory and uncertainty swirling around me. Later that night, as the last embers of the grill died down and the guests said their goodbyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just about grilling rules. The HOA's sudden aggression was a warning, a prelude to something bigger, and I wasn't about to back down because this was my home, my property, and no HOA, no matter how aggressive, was going to take that away from me. The next morning, the tension from the previous night still lingered like smoke in the air. My phone buzzed incessantly, texts and calls from neighbors, some worried, others cheering me on. I appreciated the support, but I knew this fight was far from over. Before the sun had fully risen, I was already at my desk, poring over the HOA's governing documents, the bylaws, deed restrictions, and community rules. The page Marlene had cited during the raid haunted me. Section 4B, vague and ambiguous, but open to interpretation. I wasn't going to let them use nebulous wording to control my life, especially not when I knew the truth was on my side. As I read line after line, I realized something important. The HOA's authority wasn't absolute. They had rules, yes, but only within the limits of what was clearly stated and legally enforceable. And grilling times, nowhere clearly defined. The words on the page were my shield. The HOA had crossed a line by trying to enforce rules that didn't exist. To make sure I wasn't alone, I contacted Carla, a local attorney with experience fighting over zealous HOAs. When we met later that afternoon, her eyes widened as I laid out the documents and recounted the raid. "This is classic intimidation," she said. "They want to scare you into submission. But legally, you have a strong case. If they try to fine you or restrict your grilling, you can challenge it." Relieved but cautious, I began drafting a formal letter to the HOA board, demanding they provide clear written rules regarding grilling restrictions or retract their threats immediately, within hours. I sent the letter via certified mail and email, making sure every word counted, but the HOA didn't respond, not right away. Instead, whispers began circulating around the neighborhood, rumors that I was stirring trouble and breaking the peace. One afternoon, as I worked in my garage, a knock at the door startled me. It was Linda, an older neighbor who usually kept to herself. "I just wanted to say," she began hesitantly, "don't let them bully you. I've seen them do this before, picking on people who don't toe the line." Her words were a balm and a warning. That evening, I received an unexpected message from Kevin, the young HOA agent, who'd seemed uneasy the night before. "I'm not sure about this," he wrote. "There's more going on behind the scenes. Be careful." Curiosity piqued, I decided to dig deeper. The next day, I attended the HOA's monthly board meeting and open forum, where residents could voice concerns. I entered with determination, documents in hand. When it was my turn, I stood up and addressed the board directly. "I want to know exactly where it says I can't grill after 7 p.m. Because what happened at my home was an invasion, an attempt to enforce rules that don't exist." The room grew tense. Marlene's gaze sliced through me as she replied, "The board enforces community standards to protect safety and property values." I countered, "Standards? Sure, but they have to be clear and lawful. If you're going to enforce a rule, make it public and specific." Several residents nodded. Some murmured agreement. The board shuffled papers, avoiding eye contact. Finally, a voice from the back spoke up. "Jim, a longtime resident and outspoken critic of the board. This is exactly why people distrust the HOA. We need transparency." "I support Mr. Harris." Marlene shot a glare at Jim, but the moment was mine. As I left the meeting, a strange mix of relief and foreboding settled over me. The battle lines were drawn. The HOA had underestimated me and the neighborhood was starting to question them. But would it be enough to stop the raids, the threats, and the looming fines? Or was this just the calm before the storm? After the heated HOA meeting, I thought the tide was turning. Neighbors were talking, whispers of support reached my ears, and even a few board members looked uneasy around Marlene. But the victory felt fragile, like a candle flickering in a drafter. Was wrong to be so hopeful. The next morning, I noticed it right away. My electric grill wasn't working properly. The control panel flickered erratically, and the heating element refused to ignite. At first, I blamed a power surge, but a closer look revealed something more sinister. The power cord had been tampered with, the wires frayed and deliberately cut. That wasn't an accident. Whoever did this wanted to send a message. I felt anger rise inside me, but I kept my cool. This was no longer about grilling, it was about control, intimidation, and who held the real power in our community. I documented everything. Photos of the damage, notes about the timing, and a log of suspicious activity around my property. Just days before, I'd spotted a few unfamiliar faces lurking near my backyard in the evenings. That night, I set up discreet cameras, hidden under eaves and behind bushes, to catch any unwanted visitors. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one. Meanwhile, Marlene and the HOA board remained silent in public, but I heard from a reliable source that behind closed doors, the mood was tense. The HOA was scrambling to maintain control and silence me before the issue escalated. I decided to confront Marlene directly, sending a stern letter demanding accountability for the sabotage and warning that I would involve law enforcement if this continued. Days passed with no response. Then, late one evening, as I reviewed security footage, my heart pounded. The video showed a shadowy figure lurking near the grill, someone I recognized from a neighborhood gathering weeks ago. An HOA volunteer named Greg. Greg was known for his blind loyalty to Marlene and the board, often enforcing rules with zeal. I took the footage to the police, filing a report about vandalism and harassment. The officers were professional, but warned me that proving HOA involvement might be difficult without concrete evidence linking Marlene or the board directly. Still, the message was clear. I wasn't alone. The law was on my side, and so were many neighbors. Word spread quietly but steadily about the sabotage. Support grew as residents shared their own stories of petty harassment from the HOA. The atmosphere shifted from fear to cautious defiance. One afternoon, as I was repairing the grill with a new power supply, I heard a knock on the door. It was Kevin, the uneasy HOA agent from before. He looked around nervously, then leaned in. "Listen," he whispered. "There are things you don't know. The board's been under pressure from an outside developer who wants the land. They're pushing to tighten rules and make life so difficult, people will be forced to sell." I felt the weight of his words settle like a stone in my gut. This was no longer about grilling or petty fines. This was about a power play, a battle for control of our neighborhood. I nodded slowly. "Thanks for telling me. But if they think they can bully me into giving up, they're wrong." Kevin hesitated, then added, "Be careful. They're watching." As the sun set, casting long shadows over my backyard, I realized the stakes were higher than ever. The HOA wasn't just enforcing rules, they were waging war, and had to be ready. The revelation from Kevin hung heavy in the air. An outside developer eyeing our neighborhood, the HOA tightening its grip to push people out. It all started to make sense. The sudden raids, the vague rules, the intimidation tactics, they were pieces of a larger, more sinister puzzle. But what shocked me most was how divided the community was becoming. At first, many neighbors quietly supported me, emboldened by my stand. I saw nods of approval, smiles behind fences, and occasional words of encouragement. But as the days passed, a different wave emerged. Marlene and her loyalists worked relentlessly to sway opinion. They painted me as the troublemaker, the rebellious homeowner stirring unrest. Flyers appeared on doorsteps warning of fines, lawsuits, and community breakdown if residents didn't follow the rules. Meetings were held behind closed doors, with promises of order and stability, thinly veiled threats to those who might resist. At the next HOA meeting, the atmosphere was electric, more crowded, more tense than ever. I stood and spoke again, laying out the facts. The lack of clear rules, the sabotage, the outside developer's plan. I pleaded for transparency and fairness. Some residents clapped quietly. Others sat stiffly, mouths tight. Then came the backlash. One woman, Patricia, stood up. She was a longtime member of the HOA and had always been Marlene's staunchest supporter. "You're tearing this neighborhood apart," Patricia said sharply. "We need rules to keep our property values safe. Not everyone has the luxury to pick and choose when to follow them." Murmurs of agreement echoed from one side of the room. I replied calmly, "Rules only work when they're clear and fair. When they're used to intimidate and silence, they destroy community." The division was stark, old friendships strained. Some neighbors refused to even look at me. As I left the meeting, I felt the weight of isolation creeping in. At home, I sat on the porch, watching neighbors go about their evening. Some waved cautiously. Others looked away. Just then, my phone buzzed a text from Linda, the older neighbor who had encouraged me earlier. "Don't lose heart. Every storm passes." Her words were a small comfort, but I knew the real battle was just beginning. That night, a strange car idled near my driveway. I watched through the window as figures stepped out, looking around suspiciously before driving off. The intimidation was escalating, but I wasn't backing down. Because this neighborhood was more than houses and lawns. It was my home, and I was going to fight for it. The neighborhood's division was becoming a chasm. The once friendly faces now carried suspicion. Whispers followed me on every street, and I could feel the HOA's influence tightening like a noose. But amid the growing hostility, an unexpected ally emerged. It was Mark, the quiet guy who owned the hardware store downtown. I had only exchanged pleasantries before. But one afternoon, he stopped me as I was fixing the grill. "I heard what you're dealing with," he said, lowering his voice. "I'm not one for drama, but this HOA overreach, it's gone too far." I nodded. Curious. Mark continued, "I've got equipment, surveillance cameras, motion sensors. If you want, I can help you keep an eye on things." Surprised but grateful, I agreed. That evening, with Mark's help, we installed discrete security cameras around my property, catching every angle the HOA might try to exploit. I felt a flicker of hope finally. I could watch their moves as they watched me. But the surveillance soon revealed something else: late-night meetings at the clubhouse involving Marlene, board members, and a few suited men I didn't recognize. They spoke in hushed tones about accelerating the plan and removing obstacles. The stakes were higher than I imagined. I compiled the footage and sent it anonymously to Carla, my attorney, who warned me that exposing such collusion could shake the community to its core but also make me a bigger target. The next few days were a blur of legal consultations, neighborhood whispers, and mounting tension. Then came the ultimatum. The HOA sent a formal notice. Unless I ceased all grilling activities and paid a fine of $25,000 for repeated rule violations, they would escalate the matter to court and pursue liens on my property. I stared at the letter, the weight of it threatening to crush me. But then I remembered Mark's words. "They want to fight. Give it to them." I refused to back down. Instead, I organized a neighborhood meeting at my home, inviting residents to see the truth behind the HOA's actions, the sabotage, the shady meetings, the vague rules. I showed them the surveillance footage, the legal documents, and the HOA's notice. The room was tense, but as I spoke, a slow shift happened. Neighbors began asking questions, challenging the board's narrative, demanding transparency. Some still sided with Marlene, fearful of change, but many saw the cracks in the HOA's facade. And just when I thought the tide might be turning, my phone rang late one night. A panicked voice whispered, "They're coming for you. Watch out." The line went dead. I knew the battle was far from over. But now, I wasn't alone. With Mark, Carla, and growing community support, I was ready to face whatever came next. The warning call echoed in my mind as the days grew heavier with tension. "They're coming for you." Those words weren't empty threats. I could feel it in the chilling silence that had settled around my home. I double-checked all my security cameras, making sure everything was recording. Mark had upgraded the system with motion detectors and night vision. Carla advised me to keep a detailed log of any harassment or suspicious activity. The local police had increased patrols near my property after I filed the vandalism report. But I knew they were stretched thin. One night, as the clock edged past midnight, I was jolted awake by the sound of footsteps crunching gravel outside. Heart pounding, I slipped on my shoes, grabbed a flashlight, and quietly moved toward the window. In the beam of light, I spotted two shadowy figures lurking near the fence. One held something long and metallic. It looked like a crowbar. I swallowed, hard, and reached for my phone to call the police. But just as I dialed, a third figure appeared, stepping out from the shadows. It was Kevin, the uneasy HOA agent who'd warned me earlier. "Don't call," he whispered urgently. "I'm here to help." Confused but trusting, I unlocked the door and stepped outside. Kevin quickly explained that the HOA's board had decided to escalate their tactics, sending hired enforcers to intimidate me into compliance, but he said, "There are some of us who want to stop this madness." Kevin had secretly been gathering evidence against Marlene and the board, feeding information to Carla and local authorities. He handed me a small USB drive. This is proof of the HOA's illegal collusion with that developer and their plan to force residents out. We moved inside quickly as the hired men circled the property, apparently searching for any excuse to escalate. I called the police, and within minutes, the neighborhood was alive with flashing lights and sirens. The intruders scattered, leaving behind discarded tools and a clear message. The HOA wasn't backing down. The following days brought a flurry of investigations, media attention, and neighborhood meetings. The developer's involvement was exposed, forcing Marlene and several board members to resign under pressure, but the scars of the conflict ran deep. Some neighbors still viewed me with suspicion, while others rallied behind the idea of a fair, transparent community. I realized that my fight wasn't just about a grill anymore. It was about reclaiming our neighborhood's soul from corruption and fear. With Kevin's help, Carla's guidance, and the community slowly uniting, I felt a new strength. The grill was back in action, smoke rising into the summer sky, a symbol of resilience and defiance. The days after the midnight confrontation felt like waking from a nightmare. Marlene and her closest allies had resigned. The developer's plans temporarily stalled, and the police investigations were underway. The neighborhood buzzed with cautious optimism, but the wounds ran deeper than anyone expected. At the next community meeting, the mood was tense but hopeful. Many neighbors gathered in the local park, eager to discuss the future and eager to rebuild trust. I stood up to speak, not as a lone fighter anymore, but as part of a community determined to heal. "We've faced threats and sabotage," I said, "but we've also found courage and unity. It's time to create an HOA that works for everyone, transparent, fair, and accountable." Some nodded in agreement, but others remained skeptical. Patricia, Marlene's former right hand, still challenged me. "You stirred the pot and made enemies. How do we know this won't happen again?" Her words stung, but I answered honestly, because this time, we're all involved. No one person should hold that much power. We need clear rules, but also respect for individual rights. A vote was taken to form a new interim board, one made up of residents from all sides of the conflict. I was surprised but honored when several neighbors nominated me to be part of it. Meanwhile, I focused on repairing the damage to my property. The grill was fixed, and I hosted small neighborhood barbecues to bring people together. Food became a bridge, sparking conversations and breaking down walls. But the tension wasn't gone. I noticed some neighbors still avoided eye contact, and subtle reminders that not everyone had forgiven me for the public disputes. One evening, as I cleaned the grill, a woman approached. It was Carla, my attorney, and now a friend. "Change takes time," she said gently. "You've started something important, but it won't be easy." Her words rang true. The HOA's old guard had left, but their influence lingered like a shadow. I knew the fight for the neighborhood's soul was far from over, but I was ready to keep pushing, not with anger, but with patience and persistence. Because in the end, a community is more than rules and fines. It's about people coming together, respecting each other, and standing strong against those who would divide them. As the sun set, I looked around at the neighbors chatting nearby, the laughter drifting on the evening breeze. The grill's smoke curled upward, a quiet symbol of resistance and hope. Months had passed since the stormy confrontation that shook our neighborhood to its core. The new interim HOA board was in place. Rules were being rewritten with input from residents, and a cautious peace settled over the streets. I'd hosted more barbecues, turning my backyard into a gathering place where neighbors shared stories, hopes, and, sometimes, apologies. The community was slowly mending, but I knew the true test was still ahead. One crisp autumn evening, just as I was closing up the grill, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Meet me at the old community center, midnight, come alone." My heart skipped. Was it a trap, another threat, or something else? Curiosity won. At midnight, I arrived at the dimly lit community center, the building empty except for a single figure waiting inside. It was Marlene. She looked tired, the fight drained from her eyes. "I came to talk," she said quietly. I braced myself, ready for conflict. But instead, Marlene surprised me. "I was wrong," she admitted. "I got caught up in power and fear. The developer twisted everything for their gain, and I was blind. But you showed this neighborhood what it really means to stand up." She handed me a thick envelope. Inside were documents proving the developer's illegal attempts to buy and manipulate the HOA, including emails, contracts, and a confession from one of their agents. "I want to help fix this," Marlene said. "I'm stepping down completely, and I'm willing to work with you to rebuild." Shock and suspicion warred inside me. Could I trust her? Was this genuine? But then I remembered how far we'd all come, and how important healing was. We agreed to work together to expose the developer fully, using the new evidence to push for legal action and protect the neighborhood. The following weeks were intense. Meetings with lawyers, media attention, and community forums. the developer was forced to back off. And the HOA bylaws were rewritten to prevent such abuses in the future. More importantly, the neighborhood began to feel like home again. Neighbors who had once turned their backs started smiling and chatting in the streets. The grill smoke in my backyard was no longer a symbol of defiance, but of resilience and unity. Looking back, I realized this battle was never just about a grill or a few fines. It was about standing up to corruption, reclaiming power, and finding strength in community. Then sometimes, the greatest victories come from the most unexpected alliances.